Did the most evil Sith Lord in history actually legitimately love his wife? Greetings again, Acolytes, and welcome back to the Archives. In the time when he was preparing for his invasion against the Republic, Darth Vitiate would become distracted by another special interest somewhere deep in wild space. Once again splitting his mind, his will, and his power, the Emperor would take the body of the Zakuulian male by the name of Valkorion, assuming his identity and establishing the Eternal Empire. Eventually, he would even end up marrying a woman by the name of Senya, who would be the mother of his children, the twins Arcan and Thexan, and the incredibly powerful and volatile Vaylin. Senya seems to recall a time when the two were actually quite happy together, which prompted us to ask the odd question: did Valkorion actually grow to love Senya? Was he capable of having any sort of normal relationship, care, or concern for his wife or family? Or is it simply that he was too far beyond human? Was he too far beyond her? Well, the histories tell us something a bit different, my friends, and just like with all things in Sith culture, marriage was not as straightforward as you may think. So now, it's time to merge love poems and the dark side chanting as we dive into the complicated mind of Emperor Valkorion. Marriage within Sith culture is one thing that isn't often explored, but it was something that did happen. Of course, we know this by the time of Vitiate when he became Valkorion. He had dismissed most of the practices of the Sith. During the days of the Old Empire and Vitiate's reconstituted Sith, marriage happened there all the time, but just behind the scenes most of the time. The Sith were an elitist culture, and like with any social hierarchy-based system, bloodlines were incredibly important to them. Legacy meant a lot to the Sith. Where a person comes from can determine their place in the hierarchy of the Grand Empire, again, it being structured around that. The family was very important, and marriage was rarely something done out of love, as such a concept of love was considered weakness to Sith. Instead, it was done by selecting a partner with sufficient strength in the Force that would produce even stronger offspring to bring glory and power to the family name. Everything about Sith culture was based around power plays, and marriage was no different. If any emotional feeling did exist though, it was more than likely a carnal passion. Spouses were usually expendable to one another if they believed it would further their own glory or their family's social power in the Empire. This is how it was viewed, purely transactional. But Valkorion was an interesting being, because he had all the power that he needed. He wasn't looking to share or relinquish it to an heir. Being a man with an insufferable god complex, he saw all other beings as ants beneath him with their only meaningful purpose to serve him. Giving himself over to a partnership like a marriage was more than likely the last thing on Valkorion's mind. But like with many of these perspectives, this would change all around the time that he found the world of Zakuul. Vitiate was searching for a method of increasing his power to the level of full godhood, no longer playing at it. He would end up finding and learning about the planet of Zakuul. Zakuul held a powerful, but a rather superstitious race of people. Their home was a steward to an ancient secret. That secret was the Eternal Fleet. The Eternal Fleet was built by an unknown race long ago. And because of being the stewards of the fleet, the Zakuulians had grown into one of the most powerful fighting forces in the known galaxy, and they could wield the Force. But the fleet itself could be controlled on a central remote known as the Eternal Throne. This, along with various other mystical weaponry, drew Vitiate's attention to the world of Zakuul. He became fascinated with their culture. He wanted to design a legacy that would be everlasting, but one where he would never pass away. He would position himself as the savior-like figure of the Zakuulian people, as they were extremely religious and zealot to their emperor. And he threw away the shackles of Valkorion being a simple leader, instead declaring himself the Eternal Emperor. His consciousness and power now inhabited the body of Valkorion, and he began building a new empire away from the Sith that he had already constructed. The Eternal Fleet, though, was his secret weapon, highly advanced, fully automated, and created by the Eternal Empire of Zakuul. Unlike other traditional fleets, it didn't rely on living crews at all. Its ships were rather piloted by sophisticated AI, allowing for perfect coordination in battle. The fleet's tech surpassed both anything the Republic and the Sith had ever made, and the sheer size and precision enabled the fleet to overwhelm entire systems extremely quickly. It served as the backbone of Emperor Valkorion's domination and his strategy, making him nearly unstoppable during this period of time. For hundreds of years, he would split his attention between the Eternal Empire and the Sith, until the time came for the invasion of the Republic and the known galaxy to take place. The Great Galactic War began, and it looked as though the Sith were going to have a swift victory. They had managed to catch the Republic by surprise at Korriban and had started plowing through the Outer Rim and the Mid-Rim territories with deadly precision and focus. Valkorion was focused on Sith and Jedi alike, and since the war was going extremely well in his favor, Vitiate focused his attention back on his preferred project, the Eternal Empire. As the Jedi and Sith were tearing each other apart, Vitiate found that he would build the power of his nest egg. But it didn't just end with the fleet. Valkorion was beginning to build an eternal army for his inevitable appearance in the near future, and it was here where he would meet Senya Tiall. Senya was powerful, strong-willed. She had risen from the Knights of Zakul. Unlike the other knights though, who drew their power straight from the Emperor, Senya was naturally born Force-sensitive. Her potential in the Force was great, and placed her directly within the Knights of Zakul, as she rose to be one of the best fighters among them. Her connection to the Force was pure, untethered by any greater power. Soon, she was inducted into the Emperor's elite guard, but Valkorion would take notice of her until she distinguished herself with a sharp tongue as well. He never hesitated to speak to her, and Valkorion felt that he could be honest with Senya, especially during meetings of war. Senya would often speak out against replacing human soldiers in military positions with the droid skytroopers, something that Valkorion agreed with. This caught the Emperor's attention, and he became intrigued by this woman. Valkorion was perpetually surrounded by sycophants and yes-men who either feared or adored him completely. Not that he minded such a thing, but a lot of them were just a little bit too obedient. They were worker bees to do his bidding, and they never gave him any sort of pushback or even question any decision he ever made. But Senya would. Senya was not afraid of him. She was not afraid of the better idea and the better idea becoming known. Someone who actually cared about the state and the strength of the Empire enough to challenge one of the Emperor's very decisions. But rather than seeing her as insolent, Valkorion became infatuated with her strength. He had convinced himself that he was a god, and that everything else was just a mere ant. And yet, one of these ants proved that she did not see herself as a commoner, but one worthy of respect, even from a god. 2 years would pass, and the two would become romantically involved. They would marry, and Senya went on from the elite guard to Queen of the Eternal Empire and the Eternal Throne. Although we think of Valkorion as being cold and a heartless creature, Senya does not remember him that way. She would later actually recall that the two had been happy together once. However, she would specify that it wasn't all hearts and roses. Valkorion wasn't that type of being. Nevertheless, their marriage was a good one, at least for a period of time. According to Senya's words exactly, she would describe their time together by saying this: "What we had wasn't a child's notion of romance, but we were happy. Then Arkan and his brother Thexan were born. I loved them so much, but no matter what I did, they never wanted anything to do with me, and Valkorion wanted nothing to do with them. It was exactly at the birth of their children where everything would go wrong." Right after the twins' birth, the war with the Republic had reached an issue. Before, the Sith had been steamrolling them, winning victory after victory, gaining more and more territory. However, the Jedi had now rallied the Republic armies as one force, and had stopped the Empire's advance dead in its tracks. More, they were beginning to become stronger, and now were launching a counteroffensive that was pushing the boundary line back against the Sith. Vitiate, the Emperor, was forced to pull his concentration away from Valkorion and his body, and back to the Sith Emperor body where he could give direct orders through his many voices. Although Vitiate was capable of splitting up his mind and his power between several vessels, his attention and focus was a limited commodity. And from what we currently understand about him, the bodies he inhabited could operate independently from him, but without his attention, they sort of went into an automatic pilot mode. The lights were on, but no one was home. When this happened, they were completely devoid of any kind of expression, and would carry out Vitiate's pre-purposed plans until he shifted his focus back onto their body. He was always aware of what they were doing, because they were still him, but they could only have his full attention in one place at a time. Because of this, the once affectionate Valkorion that Senya had known suddenly became withdrawn, distant, dangerous. She never knew why he became this way, so quickly in fact too, how he appeared depressed, and how he disregarded their children as nothing. Senya attempted to show her sons love and acceptance, but the boys completely ignored her. They idolized their father, they craved his approval and praise, a longing that the twins would be denied of for their entire lives. Despite the hard-headedness of her husband though, Senya still had yet another child with him, their daughter, Vaylin. This time, Senya did everything she could to teach Vaylin not to follow values such as power or strength in the Force, but to desire love, family, and unity. Vaylin, however, figured out her natural power in the Force was beyond her brothers, and watched her twin brothers train, desiring to be just like them. But she was dangerous, even to Valkorion. Eventually though, Vaylin too craved her father's approval, and dismissed her mother. But unlike Arcan and Thexan, her power was too much to control. Even when in the womb, she moved furniture around Senya, but now, as a little girl, she was deadly. There was one occasion when she was playing with one of the Imperial guards, the guard who accidentally dropped the ball. Senya, filled with sadness, reached out with the Force and inadvertently tore the guard's body to shreds. Terrified at this, Senya attempted to help her channel her daughter's power through training, but Vaylin would lose control again and again, killing several Knights of Zakul. Valkorion was there to witness a lot of this, and while he was interested in what his children was displaying and that she had grown so powerful in the Force so quickly, Valkorion was intimidated by her, showing tendencies that reminded her of himself, the young Tenebrae. One day, Senya would go to Valkorion, begging him for help with Vaylin. She was troubled, the guards were terrified of her, and even Senya was terrified to interact with her, to guide her in some way, to show affection, to do anything. But Valkorion had a different solution, to merely cage Vaylin's mind. Locking her power away was the most that he could do. He took Vaylin to the world of Nathema, his homeworld now devoid of the Force. He locked her there in the sanitarium, where she underwent brutal mental and physical reconditioning at the hands of the Nathema zealots, transforming Vaylin from a sweet but a troubled girl into a psychopath devoid of empathy. Sensing her daughter suffering from the world though, Senya decided that she would rescue her from Nathema. Despite Senya making it all the way there and fighting her way out of the sanitarium with her daughter in hand, Vaylin refused to go with her any further. When she was locked away, the girl blamed her mother for all of her suffering, believing that her mother saw her as a monster to be caged away. She now felt nothing but hatred for Senya and stayed behind at the sanitarium. At that moment, Valkorion emerged and had Senya taken away back to Zakul. The Imperial Queen now saw that her husband was a madman and felt as though her children no longer were safe with him, as she attempted to take them with her and run away from Zakul. However, after Senya reached out again, both of her sons and Vaylin again refused. They called their mother weak and remained devoted entirely to their father. Now vowing to bring an end to Valkorion's rule and to save her family, Senya departed to join the resistance. Valkorion did not stop her from leaving, and he wanted to focus on keeping his powerful children in control. To Valkorion, the importance of his children goes beyond their power. It is that they are perfect vessels for his spirit to inhabit should it ever require it. This is why he keeps them so close. They are some of the only bodies in the entire galaxy that could inhabit his powerful spirit. But to return to the core question, did Valkorion actually love his wife Senya in any capacity? Well, I would say no. I do not believe that Valkorion has the capacity to love, as he stripped himself from all feeling in the process that granted him immortality, all the way back during the ritual of Nathema. The only thing he felt now was the hunger for power and the fear of losing it. From the evidence from the story that it presents, Valkorion's infatuation with Senya was just that, a special interest simply because she displayed desirable traits and a strength in the Force that was unnatural. There is nothing to suggest that Valkorion truly cared for his wife though, and I do not place a lot of stock in Senya's opinion that they were once happy. She specified that they did not have a child's idea of romance, likely meaning that their union was devoid of any typical rendering of affection, mutual decision making, and meaningful time spent with one another. It was rather an act of duty. I believe that Valkorion likely saw her the way that he saw the Sith Empire that he had left behind. A fascinating, but an ultimately failed experiment, one which did provide usefulness and entertainment, but ultimately something that he would tell you that he outgrew. We cannot forget that the Emperor is a cruel, a heartless entity. His heart is black, devoid of the capacity for light even. He feeds on the very Force itself, and desires peace in the galaxy in the form of total silence. Familial and marital love have no place within a creature of the dark side such as this. But with that, my friends, what do you think of the story? Do you believe that we have it wrong and that Valkorion did love his family, at least in some strange way? If so, please comment your reasoning down below. And if you thought this was an interesting character dive, what other relationships would you like to see us explore in Star Wars in the future? Until next time, thank you so much for joining us today, and may the Force be with you.